It's one thing to talk about what editors need, but it's another to have the opportunity to hear straight from the source what they look for when looping, stretching, and chopping up our cues. So I was thrilled when I had the chance to chat with Josh Siegel, a real-life professional film editor who makes his living making the shows that use so much of our music. We discuss form, edit points, trends, originality, and ultimately, what we as composers can do to focus on giving editors what editors want. What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Cues podcast, a weekly podcast about all things production and library music, where we talk about industry topics and explore how you can grow your career as a working production music composer. Plus, in my Year of Taxi update, we're going to check in on any returns or forwards and take a listen to this week's submission, which is another pulsing investigative tension cue. And then a little later on, I'm going to give my thoughts on an epic trailer cue written by longtime 52 Cues community member Richard Bagley, so you definitely want to stick around for that. If this is your first time here, welcome. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the audio on the go, I just want to thank you for spending part of your day with me. I also want to give a huge word of thanks to the family, friends, and patrons of 52 Cues who help keep the podcast, the channel, and everything going. We're 100% community supported, so if you like what I do here, don't thank me, thank them. But if you want to learn more about how you can help support 52 Cues and also unlock extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, and a ton more, then be sure to click on the links in the description or stick around because we're going to be talking more about that a little later in today's episode. So first things first, let's check in on my Year of Taxi update, where this week I am returning once again to the pulsing investigative tension instrumentals. This was the same brief that I wrote to last week, and pulsing investigative tension instrumentals are needed by a top-notch production music library that's landed tons of placements in TV shows, films, and commercials. The library's brand new to requesting music from Taxi. It's a great opportunity for with an award-winning company, and then some Mac Quail, some other scored shows, and some game soundtracks. And so the brief goes on to say, please send them well-composed instrumental cues that evoke a suspenseful, tension-filled vibe and feel that is oozing with dark, moody energy that could work well for a variety of investigative scenes in TV shows and films. Your submission should have engaging motifs, pulsing rhythms, and solid arrangement centered around a central motif with layers, forward motion, dynamics, and interest. Your instrumentation can range from orchestral-based to electronic to a hybrid-style approach and should fall in the general wheelhouse of the references. Whichever approach you choose to take, please be sure your production is polished and any virtual sounds or samples you used are high quality and state-of-the-art. If you have tracks that could enhance, complement, and create an overall uneasy tone and mood, then send them in. And then there's a bit about the length, 90 seconds to 3 minutes, non-faded endings, no outside samples. Make sure that you're prepared to do cut downs as well as bit depth and sample rate and all of that. Again, I'm really glad that Taxi is starting to include more and more of this information. And again, I'm not sure if this is coming from the library or this is just coming from libraries giving feedback to Taxi because they're getting submissions which aren't meeting these needs, along with like cut down information. So exclusive deal. And so this week's cue is called Great Spouse Detective. I've been inspired by who I think does like the best titles in the business, which is Bleeding Fingers. And so just check out Bleeding Fingers on Spotify. Their title game, their album concepts are absolutely best in the business. So this is a Great Spouse Detective. right, so that was Great Spouse Detective and features the new double felt grand piano from Keyscape. And if you want to see a complete breakdown of this cue, where I go kind of track by track and show the sounds and how it's all put together, that cue breakdown is available for our friends and family subscribers over at 52 Cues. And if that's something that you're interested in, then check that out. So I've not heard back, and I actually checked just before I started recording. I've not heard back yet. And so hopefully by next week, I'll be able to let you know whether Great Spouse Detective, along with Big Girls Don't Crime, we'll see if those get forwarded. But yeah, that is my Year of Taxi check-in for week 13. You know, we talk a lot on the channel and in the community about making sure that our music is editor friendly and that we do everything we can to reduce friction for an editor. We want to make their life easy. We want to make it so that they can use our music, everything from, edit points and arrangement techniques and being consistent in mood and tempo and emotion and key signatures. We talk a lot about it, but it really kind of occurs to me that as composers, we very rarely get to interact directly with editors. So when I had a mutual friend of mine, one Natalie Cordone, who is a fantastic singer and actress, and I've done gigs with her, and Sean Kilgore, they're part of the jazz duo that I gig around with pretty regularly here in Florida. She introduced me to Josh Siegel, who is a bona fide working film editor who focuses and specializes in unscripted TV. And I jumped at the chance to pick his brain and ask him all the things that I have been taught, all the things that I believe, and all the things that I espouse here on the channel to make sure that I'm really on the right track. So here is my interview with Josh Siegel. I'm so happy to be joined by Josh Siegel, who is a producer and an editor for shows such as Love is Blind, Growing Up Hip Hop, Claim to Fame, The Bradshaw Bunch, just steeped in unscripted television. And I thought it would be great to hear from the horse's mouth, as it were. We talk about editors and editing and pleasing our editors, making their lives as easy as possible. We talk about that all the time on the podcast. And I thought, who better to answer some of these direct questions than an actual real life editor? Josh, thank you so much for excavating yourself from your editing bay and being in the sunlight with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's fun. And I have to give a shout out to Natalie Cordone, our mutual friend, who is a phenomenal actress. And I've known her for a really long time, and I think you have too. And I'm glad she put us together.
Absolutely. We did a gig together, because she's also an amazing vocalist and a vocal teacher. And she said, well, I have this friend who is an editor. Would you be, interested in chatting with him? And if I had little puppy ears, they would have perked right up because like I said, we talk all the time as production music composers about making what we do create as little friction with editing and with editors as possible. But before we get into all of that, I just want to maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into editing. What's your background? My understanding is you're not necessarily musical, but you deal with music all the time. So how did you get into it, and what is this whole gig like?
Sure. I guess going way back, I was like a young actor when I was like a kid, and that was sort of my first branching out into the entertainment industry. And from a very young age, I knew, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be involved in some way or another. So from working in the writer's room of Homicide: Life on the Street when I was 14 to going to USC Film School to then working in film for many years with Jenna Topping and her partner at the time, Betty Thomas, and developing and helping produce some feature films with them. Surviving Christmas was one. And then I helped run a small production company with Jeno, and we did Guess Who with Bernie Mac, great Bernie Mac, and Ashton Kutcher, and Zoe Saldana, who's now huge, but wasn't then. Catch and Release with Jennifer Garner and Timothy Oliphant. So yeah, I was involved with film for a really long time, and then Jenna went on a little hiatus for a few years, and I had all these friends working in Unscripted, and I was just really drawn to the speed of it, like versus film, you can spend 1 or 2 years, working on a script. And then, in Unscripted, I had all these friends. They're like, yeah, I just finished a show and now I'm on to my next one 3 months later and it's on the air next week. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds cool. So I started to get involved in that, first as a producer, and I did that for many years. And, producing an Unscripted is very editorial. It's sort of coming up with a rough framework for the editors and really working in close, collaboration with editors. And after many years of doing that, I was like, that's what I really want to be doing. And so for the past many years, I've been editing and Unscripted, and occasionally producing, occasionally co-executive producing, depending upon the project. And now I'm kind of coming around full circle again, and I'm producing a couple documentaries and pitching a kind of unscripted hybrid show, and taking a book out to hopefully turn that into a feature. So I have my hands in a lot of different pots right now. But my bread and butter right now, my day job is unscripted editing, and I love it. And Love is Blind was something I'm really proud of. I did 2 seasons of that for Netflix, and just recently finished a show for ABC called Claim to Fame that I'm really happy with. It is a weird show. If I were to tell you the premise, you'd be like, that sounds so dumb. And just about anyone who watches it or works on it is like, well, this show is fantastic. It is so much fun. How is this so much fun? Like, literally, that is the response from everyone who's watched it or worked on it. So I'm going back to the 2nd season of that in a few weeks, and I'm really excited, and so happy to talk to you about this and our process, because honestly, music, I think especially in Unscripted, but in any type of storytelling, is so integral. And I am not trained in music, so I will get words wrong. I will sound stupid about certain things. You can please correct me. But I love music, and I often am sort of recognized for, my sort of riskiness in my musical choices. I like making bold, strange choices and experimenting, and sometimes it's really wrong, and sometimes it's really, really right. And so I have a relationship with music where I find it's like such a part of my creative process and such an important part of the finished, shows that I'm just really happy to talk to you in particular, because when Natalie showed me, some of your work, it just really stood out to me. It's like, oh, this guy really gets it. This is the type of stuff that, you open up an album like that or a library, and I'm like, yes, I get to have fun in here. I get to play with this. He gets it. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be dynamic. It's gonna be building. It's gonna be doing all the things that I'm looking for in a cue, and that doesn't always happen. So I was very happy to meet you and talk to you.
Oh, you honor me. Thank you. Thank you. So that means a lot. That's like, validation, because it's to be on this side of the process. We make music that looks to capture a specific mood or specific emotion, and then we kind of ship it off to the library, and we see maybe some royalty statements, so we never really have an opportunity to interact with the people that interact with our music. So that means a lot to it. I really, really appreciate it. Now, I have been under the belief that when we say unscripted TV, it's because reality TV, sometimes that kind of becomes like a bad word, like this just kind of gets used as almost as a pejorative, but sure. Because there isn't, it's not like we just turned on a security camera and then people just live their life. I mean, there's drama, there's storytelling, there's all of those things. So I like the concept of unscripted, but can you explain how unscripted is fundamentally different than like a feature or than scripted, other than the fact, I mean, obviously there's no script, but how do you as an editor reconcile the fact that it's unscripted, but you still need to put a story together? Yeah.
Yeah. It very much depends upon the show. It's evolved a lot over the years in terms of Well, I'll get into that in a minute.
Mm.
But at its roots, Unscripted to me is documentary. And, documentary is, nothing is more fascinating than real life. And there's, there to me, it's fascinating, watching, a real person in a real life and having those relationships and having those stories come from their truth. Can be wonderful. And, I look to, the early seasons of The Real World as like some of my favorite unscripted documentary television. And that was relatively hands off in the way that it was produced. They shot it for a very long time, for months and months and months, and then found the story in post. And that is the way I prefer to work. It depends upon the show how much, we're able to do that. But that was a show that I thought, was really groundbreaking, broke a lot of rules, and still at its heart was, very grounded in documentary filmmaking.
Yeah.
And yeah, we do not have. Usually we do, we do not have like a word for word script. Some of the shows that I've worked on, there can be outlines of, we need a scene like this and we'll do a scene like that. And the producer sometimes can be involved in sort of shaping things right in the field of what the scene and what the arcs will are.
But there's not these aren't actors reciting lines. There's not a writer or a team of writers making sure that like there's all this narrative structure in place before the cameras roll necessarily. Is that
ideally not? Yeah. I mean, listen, in Unscripted, the producers and the editors do a lot of writing, but ideally that writing is happening after the fact. Gotcha. Ideally, we've shot a great deal of material that have organic stakes. You have built. My favorite type of scene is when someone really wants something. And more than that is when someone else in the scene really wants something that's the opposite of that. And then you have a really strong point of view. And when those are, when there's a built-in conflict there, some of the shows that I've worked on, because of the network is afraid of, shooting something and not getting the material. They're afraid, that it's not going to be interesting. So they're like, well, come up with some story ideas and we will shoot roughly those story ideas. And hopefully, there's enough of like, if you're shooting a family, dysfunctional family show, which I've done many of, if there's enough sort of like truth to their dynamic, if there's some relationship between those people that is, real and authentic, that will seep into the sort of pre-scripted, soft scripted, some of these shows they're kind of soft scripted. Okay. But the way I prefer to work is, you don't know what's going to happen. You put maybe these people in a strange organic setting, like A Love Is Blind, these are real people. They're not being told what to do, but they're in a very, specific situation where something is going to happen. They're being told you're going to date a bunch of people without seeing them for, 10 days. And then you're going to marry one of them, which is preposterous, but nobody is being told what to do. Right. Outside of that. And so whatever their conversations are and, relationships are, as they evolve is going to be real. And then it's up to us to sort of, to shape that story and to pick those pieces, because we'll have hundreds of hours. And so we're hand selecting those pieces to have an arc and to have a beginning and a middle and an end that's engaging. And music is really effective, in that process. I never try to lead with my music, but the way I like to use music is, if we're feeling awkward as an audience, to have the music then come in a little bit right afterwards and be like, yeah, to validate, yes, this is awkward, isn't it? And then to elevate the awkwardness or the comedy or the suspense or, and to have the music just sort of come in and intensify whatever feelings we're already feeling. And I think for me, music is a great sort of way to sometimes figure out the point of view in the scene, which is the most important thing. Sometimes I need help to, define what is the scene really about. I've shaped it, but I don't quite know yet. And if I find a certain cue, it helps me. Oh, it's about this, and that little section doesn't make sense anymore, and this little section doesn't make sense anymore, but suddenly this little paragraph, I use it as grammar, this cue makes this little, chunk have a story and have a purpose and have a meaning. And then maybe that little piece that doesn't fit in works really well at the end now for its own little piece, its own little, narrative thing at the end of the scene.
Yeah. And it's all that subtext and everything that a writer works really hard to make sure the dialogue and the character development and the narrative arc communicates those things, where I would imagine when you're dealing with unscripted, sometimes you have to lean on the music to really help underscore, from lack of a better term, underscore what we should be feeling during that.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, most of the time we've done our work ahead of time and we've shaped it and it has a structure to it, and it plays great without any music. But especially in unscripted, we do rely a lot on music, and ideally it's adding that extra layer. And it's also an extra layer of happy accidents. So much in unscripted is, oh my God, like there's this random joke that my story producer found, and he's like, I don't know where this goes. It's just funny. Or like an interview bite. It just made me laugh. And the happy accidents, like, oh my God, if I put that in there. Same with music. I find a cue and it's like, oh, I marry that cue to that joke. And suddenly this sort of scene becomes about this other thing. It sort of, it expands.
It elevates the scene beyond either just the music or just the visuals. Yeah, that's really good. I want to talk about some of the things that we think we're doing to help editors, and I want you to tell me if we're on the right track. And one of the things,
I'm just one editor, by the way, so it might help another editor and not me, or vice versa. But yes, sorry.
But so far you are the authority on this.
I'm the one on this 45-minute podcast.
Gotcha. Your disclaimer is noted. Okay, so one of the things that I tell students all the time is stick to one emotion in your cues. In a production music library, editors, for the most part, if they have a scene that starts in one emotion and transcends to another emotion, it's difficult for editors to find one piece of music that communicates that effectively. So editors will more likely take two cues and then edit those together. Is that accurate? You're really looking for single emotions throughout, and you're editing together those types of things.
So I'm trying to put myself in the place of editing right now, because honestly, I do get very lost in it when I'm editing, especially when I'm editing music. It's the one time where if I have like a showrunner or a producer, I'm like, okay, get out. I gotta I go into like this altered state. I think for the most part, I think you're right. I don't want the cue meandering into too many different things. Usually I want it to do one sort of emotional journey that sort of builds and has peaks and valleys. The one thing that I don't want is for, a cue to sort of stay at the same place. I want it to build. And crescendo often into sort of like, the ultimate, emotion, whether that's, building to a dramatic or comedic climax. I will say I do get really excited when a cue is able to tactfully incorporate two different emotions.
Okay.
It's rare that it happens, but it does feel like one of those happy accidents where it's like I have something that is both emotional and funny, and I'm probably I might start one cue and then end it and then let it be dry and then bring in another cue. But sometimes I find a cue and it's like it has that touch where it is emotional and it is funny, or it is emotional and it is dramatic, and it works for both.
Gotcha.
So it's a harder thing to do. You can F it up, if you're trying to do too much. But I would say if a composer felt inspired to sort of, to do two things in one cue.
Now, are
Sometimes
you
those are the
saying
perfect. Yeah.
are you saying simultaneously? Because in my mind, it's like a cue that starts funny and ends emotional. So that the over the 2 minutes, we're
A
traveling,
journey.
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
versus one that maybe plays funny with a little nostalgia or something. It's a dramedy that has a little heartstring tug on it.
I guess all of those things. I mean, I'm in awe of what you guys do because I could never fathom doing it. But yeah, I'll have, thousands of cues and, yeah, sometimes I do want like a nostalgic funny cue,
Mm-hmm.
but those cues that sort of like start off in one place and it sort of evolves somewhere else, that can be really wonderful when it
Yeah.
happens.
I could imagine they'd be tough to find, and I would imagine it would slow your whole process down, trying to find the one cue that travels correctly from emotion A to emotion B. But like you said, happy accident. It's like writing in an odd time signature, or whatever. It's the exception and not necessarily the rule. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, finding the right cue. It is probably the lengthiest part of my job because I really do. There's a like soulfulness to it. There's like it really is inspiration, and it's like what I'll often do is I'll spend 3 hours just looking at cues and finding stuff that inspires me that I feel like I might like or I might need based upon the scenes that I've coming up, and I just throw them into a bin, and then I'm like, oh, I let me try that weird cue that was shocking and felt weird, but I loved it. I have it, and 9 times out of 10, that cue is perfect, and I just like intuitively grabbed it. I just had a feeling, and so it's this funny dance between just looking at tons of music and then finding the ones that I have that sort of special connection with.
It reminds me from the composing side is we'll have a synthesizer or something, and we'll have thousands of presets, sounds,
right.
And we're just just auditioning after patch after patch, and then you get one that you're like, oh, that little spark happens, and then you can favorite it and put it in a bin, like you said. So it sounds like very, very similar type of a process there.
Yeah. And I often, I end up using the Extreme library a lot, and they have a tool where you can like go to like, YouTube or Spotify and I'll bring in like an artist that I love. Mm-hmm. Remy Wolf. I'm obsessed with Remy Wolf right now. So I'll find a bunch of Remy Wolf songs, and it finds similar vocalist stylings or similar, instrumentation or just whatever magic algorithmically it does. It finds me similar cues, and sometimes that can be a really magical way to bring in a cue that I would never land on in and of itself. Gotcha. But there's some comparison there. All right. And I love cues that are fun. No matter what, I love cues that are fun. Maybe it's just the type of shows that I'm working on, but if it's mysterious or dramatic or, even if it's doing some other purpose, if there's a sense of fun to it, I always gravitate towards that. I want to be having fun no matter what else I'm doing.
Do you find certain composers that you keep kind of dipping back into that well because you're just, wow, I know when I see this composer's name show up in a playlist, I know it's going to be good? Or are the composer's name kind of stripped away and you don't really notice that?
It depends on the library. But no, very often, I'll find a cue that I love, and then I'll be able to, click on that, that name and see everything that she or he is, has also done in the similar genre, or I'll look at other genres too, just because I like what they're doing. Mm. So yeah, no, I definitely find, composers that I, and especially for a certain show, it can be so unique, and it's like, oh, this person really matches up with this type of scene on this show.
One of the things that I'm concerned with, talking about making, editors' lives easy and minimizing friction is I never want like an editor to like my music, but the things I'm doing in the cue just makes, just creates just some friction for them. Is the inverse true where you're like, there's Dave's music and I really like him, but man, it's kind of difficult. So maybe shy away, or are you maybe not at liberty to say that?
I mean, there are certain libraries where, I mean, if you want to get into the things that I do and don't like about cues, for me and the types of shows that I'm working on in my process, yeah, there are like libraries in particular where it's like, oh, there's no good sting outs for any of these cues, and it's like I'm not gonna waste my time going to this library, because the most upsetting thing, and it's definitely for any unscripted editor, is to find a cue that works perfectly and then you get to the end and it just fades out.
Oh,
and
that's a cardinal sin.
I think so too, and that it can be really painful, especially because I'm going fast and spontaneity. It's just like I'm editing with this cue. Yeah, it's like it's magic. It's happening. I get to the end, and it's like it either fades out or it has a sting out that like does something completely different musically or tonally. It like the whole cue is like, this sort of like, emotional, soulful thing. And then it's like, it's like, what have you done to me? So then I'll try to find another ending that will work with it. But that that I'm not a trained musician. And so that can be like, oh, I need a lot of things to line up to make that happen. So more often than not, I'm just like, was not meant to be. Let's not look at this library anymore. Or a lot of sting outs, they'll be like, 24 frames long. I mean, it's just like, there's like so abrupt. And it's like, well, that's not going to work for me. I mean, I can do some, editorial work to help that, but that can be a problem.
Yeah. It's creating friction, and it's making your life difficult, and it's slowing your whole process down, because if you've spent however long editing with that other cue and now you kind of have to start over again. And if the job is to help you tell your story, then by not having a solid, sting out ending, or I use the term button quite a lot, then that's just made your life difficult. It's just created friction. So I'm all about, and I can't believe a library would let anything just slowly fade out. That's if there's like the 10 commandments, and I actually recently did a podcast, the 10 commandments of production music. And one of them is thou shalt end on a button on tonic, right? On the one chord, da-da-ba-ba-da. Like, you have to let them know when to clap, give editors a little piece that they can stick to the ending and move around as much as possible. So it surprises me that libraries are out there doing that, but it's also, it also helps to know. So if you're, I'm talking to listeners here or viewers, if you've got music out in libraries and they're getting zero traction, maybe it's not you, maybe it's your library. I don't know. What are some, let me unpack another truism, and you tell that I believe, and then you tell me how accurate this is. And one is that we should be giving you tracks and cues that have predictable, transient phrases that are visibly, like you can see them visually in the waveform, and I think you kind of already mentioned this, like peaks and valleys, but very kind of predictable, usable musical chunks. Is that accurate?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I don't want you guys to sacrifice your artistry and making the best cue possible. But yes, when I'm able to like look at the actual, cue in terms of what it's doing and the visual representation and edit clearly from that, it does make my job a lot easier, because I'm not trained musically. It's a lot of guesswork. I have a good, ear for like what sounds good to me, but it really helps when I can see it. And it really helps when there's a sort of a logic to it and it's not overly complicated, because I love when a cue, has different sorts of movements, and it like, it very often, the cues that I love, it kind of has 15 or 20 seconds of like, I'm starting to feel this. And then it moves up into this sort of other like next, intensity, or it makes a little left-hand turn that's really interesting. But I love when a cue, it goes bigger and broader, and then it has a little quieter moment, and I'll mix that all up and I'll edit it together, and I'll make it work for the scene that I've cut. I'm rarely, if ever, cutting to the music unless maybe for a transition. So I'm having to break your cue up into like little pieces. So when it works in that way, and I'm able to take that section and move it here, and it still sounds really good. Yeah, that makes me happy, and that lets me to stay in my flow. Because as an editor, when I'm working with music, it's a real flow that I'm getting into. And when I have this sort of, the type of music that is just helping to facilitate it, then it makes me really excited and happy.
Excellent. Which brings me to another point, which is the idea of edit points. This is something we hear a lot in music. We have to give editors edit points. What do you look for in edit points in the cues? And maybe I need to define it on my side.
I mean, maybe because because I'm not classically trained.
Gotcha.
It's intuitive for me. So
gotcha.
you talk. And
so
I'll answer.
When we talk edit points, and this is the way that I teach it, it's a point of pause in the music, usually before like another section change or something, where if you're looking at the waveform, you can see a transient and then a little fade out, so that an editor, if they needed to cut and spread it out, insert dialogue, and then come back in strong. The idea is it's not just complete solid wall of music from downbeat to the end, but giving points within the cue that an editor can cut and chop around.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely look, for, when it goes like that, that's all, and I can see, where the wave is like giving me a chance, and then I try it, and sometimes it sounds great and sometimes it doesn't. So I'll try again. Sometimes I'll use a different section, but what I think you're talking about, I mean, I refer to it as like when the music stops down, and gives me a chance to sort of like, if it has built-in sort of stop downs for like a dramatic or a comedic, sort of purpose, and I can like let someone like say a line, in the space of the, dry.
Right.
That is great, especially for the comedic shows that I'm working on, because we use music as punctuation. So like when we can, let something really land, with the music and
room for a punchline.
Yeah. And like that feels really great. So yeah, not every cue needs to do that, but especially for comedic cues, it's great. I will always gravitate towards the composers who are naturally doing that.
And I actually wrote that down. I hadn't heard that term, stop down. That's the term that's
what I use. Okay. I think that's what I use with my friends. I don't know. Like honestly, so much of what I do is so intuitive, and we kind of come up with our own sort of language. But yeah, we let the music stop down. I mean, I think that's how in my own circle how we talk.
No, and this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation. Because what we do goes hand in hand. And so like editors are over there in your silo, and we're over here in our silo, and we should be talking. And so having you on, this is, exactly. And I'm going to start using that term and stop down, because it makes a lot more sense. Edit point, okay, what does that mean? But a stop down to where the music kind of crescendos and then fades and gives you an opportunity to make an edit. So let's change gears a little bit. We've talked about some of the things that you like. We've hinted at maybe some of the things you don't like. Are there any other things that composers keep doing and you're like, guys, you're killing me, Smalls, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm going to be saying anything groundbreaking. I imagine everything I'm going to be saying is stuff that is probably part of your 10 Commandments, which I haven't looked at, but I feel like I'll hit some of them. We always want stems, always, because I mean, just obviously, like, we do a lot of the sort of like building, and sometimes like just having the drums or just having the piano for the first minute allows us to then bring in, the rest of the full cue. And it just gives us a lot of flexibility and leeway to sort of, use all the pieces of the music in the most effective way. So if it's just full cues, that can be challenging. I love a light cue. Sometimes like a light stem. If it's like the full cue, but there's also like a light version.
Just like an alternate minus mix or something like that.
Yeah. I'll very often find like that's really doing a lot of what I need to do. I mean, many editors are a lot more like for every cue, they'll have, 8 different stems that they're playing with. I don't know if I'm lazy. Sometimes I do that. I mean, often I'll do that. But if I find a light cue and that really works for what I need for the first, 30 seconds, and then I can cut to the full, and that does it, and I'm able to, move on, I want to get through the scene as fast as possible for it to feel great. And then I end up coming back to it. Maybe I swap out 2 of the cues. So I don't want to get too laborious in terms of like all my music stuff, because I might find, that cue is already being used in the next episode or in the later part of this episode. So anyway, I'm getting into the weeds. But
no, I love it. I'm soaking all of this up, man.
Let's see, stems. Cues that it bothers me when a cue is like completely repetitive. Sometimes you open up a cue and it's like, oh my God, this is so perfect. But then it doesn't do anything else. It just stays in the exact sort of like.
Now, a question about that, because, we write, for sports, and we write for like tasking for documentaries and for dramedy and all of that stuff. When you say it doesn't go anywhere, do you mean, and I'm trying to find common terminology here, so I'm not going to hit you with a bunch of musical terms, but do you mean like just kind of the rhythm and the pacing? Do you mean instrumentation choices? Do you mean like emotional shifts or like the chords changing or anything like that?
I don't necessarily mean chords changing, and be careful with chords changing, because it can be wonderful, but it can also make it very difficult to edit. Sometimes I find the perfect cue and there's so much going on with like a change of key, like where it's like, oh, this doesn't work anymore. Like that, like I can't go from this part of the cue to the end of the cue because it's
like a character changing costumes in between takes,
Right.
Yeah.
If it only works if I use the full 3-minute version, that's very rarely going to work for me, because usually I'm only allowed by like a network sort of, rule almost to like use 45 to 60 seconds of a cue. So if it's doing too much, but what I'm really saying is I want the cues to sort of build an intensity.
Gotcha.
It doesn't, if the instrumentation changes, okay. If it just sort of, I like it to build. I like it to start small and to get big.
So it's about energy more than just, because in our minds, our composer brain goes, okay, development and an arc and all of this stuff. But we're really talking about kind of energy levels within the same kind of sandbox.
Yeah, energy or emotion, or if it God, I'm imagining what it must be like to be a composer and to like listen to an editor talking about what they need. It's like,
dude,
it's the same thing when a producer's telling me. It's like, what are you saying? So I feel for you guys.
No way. This is gold, because our job is to interpret that. Just like your job is to interpret the producer, the composer's job is to interpret from people. That you knowing musical terms is not a prerequisite for you being an editor. No more than me knowing how to write a script is a prerequisite for me writing music for TV. So no, I think it's great. And again, exactly why I want to have this conversation. So anybody an apology.
Let me think. I did make some notes. Let me see what else. Yeah. I do love like mix of genres, which I know looking at, a lot of the work that you're doing, you do a lot of sports stuff, which is amazing and is not a world that I'm part of. But, a lot of the other types of stuff that you're doing for like, whether The Bachelor or like, Discovery, that is more, my world. And it's like, yes, when you can have dramedy with a hip hop flavor, that's way better than we have reams and reams and reams of music that it's just dramedy, and it's like the same cues that you've heard or types of cues that you've heard for like 20 years. So when it has hip hop and it sounds not just like what you'd think of as like cheesy hip hop, but like actually something, I would listen to this. or if it's like tropical house mystery, or if it's like electronica drama, like that sort of blending of stuff that really gives a sort of flavor. And that, when I'm, especially if I'm a lead editor or if I'm early on a show, I'm looking for like, what is the palette that we're using that fits the area that we're shooting in, the type of characters, the type of stories, where it feels like, oh, this is like a world, and music really helps sort of set that stage. So yeah, it's great when it's like, oh, this is what these characters would be listening to. And so it's kind of complex. It's not just dramedy.
Yeah, I think of it like fusion cooking, like Korean tacos, right? You're just taking two things and mashing them together. And so like dramedy, hip hop, I've started doing Americana dramedy. So not just like Americana that's comedic, but taking your typical like pizzicato standard dramedy and mushing it with, slide, cigar box guitar and harmonica and all of those things, just fusing these things together. And some of the editors have really enjoyed it because, like you said, it becomes woven into the tapestry of the kind of the not the identity of the show, but it becomes...
No, it is the identity. It really is.
Yeah, it becomes another character,
Yeah, I mean, one of the shows that I did, for many, many years was Chris Lee Knows Best. Mm. And for that show, it took place in the South, but because they were so wealthy, I mean, it was a fraud. They're all in jail now. But
whoops.
Whoops.
Whoopsie.
We had a classical, we used classical music, and a lot of, really, well-known classical music. And that was our lead editor who was on from the beginning, Ed Hanlon, kind of set that sort of as the musical identity, and it made it feel unique. If you watch 20 seconds of that show, you'll know it's weird, it's special, and it feels like really unique. And so like, usually it's not anything like classical music, but what you do, it really is identity forming. And the one other thing that I'll say that I'm always wanting is transition music. I'm sort of annoyed that we lean on transition so much. If you look at a good movie, you look at any good movie, it doesn't need to cut outside. You don't have to see the moon or the exterior of the building and the sun going up. Like it's such like a tired trope, but like these network executives really need it. They really you just got to do it.
Define transit, because in my mind I'm thinking like, the Seinfeld boom, 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 boom. Is that what you mean, or
that is what I mean? But a lot of the shows that a lot of the sort of unscripted shows nowadays, it's a B-roll transition. It's a palette cleanser. So you may have a scene that's like very dramatic, and we don't want to live the entire episode in this drama. We're about to get into something that's really comedic. So rather than smash cutting to this comedic scene, what we wind up doing is we have a transition. And so it's a B-roll transition. Sometimes it's really fun and sometimes it's really beautiful, but we inevitably end up using a cue that lets us know that, it's like a palate cleanser. That was really heavy. That was really dramatic. Now we're going to have fun, and it's a new day and it's gorgeous. And it's a different style of music, but the composers who are really good with transition music, we're always in need of that, because you cannot really reuse a transition cue that much,
right?
Within an episode or within a series. So in that way, I mean, that is something to keep in mind. But they're often a lyric up. They're often with vocals, but they don't need to be. But it's like something that is really, really, really fun. Something that it feels like if I turn the radio on right now, I would dance to this. I would bop my head to this. This is like fun and vibrant and like has so much energy, and the instrumentation feels like the best possible world that these characters would live in, and it gives me a chance to really be creative with, the B-roll. And
so are these, so these, we're not necessarily talking about, just edits pulled necessarily from longer. These are cues that I'm actually making notes. These are cues that were written specifically at, how long are we talking? 15, 30 seconds or even shorter?
So they're often full cues. They're often, 2-minute cues, and they often make a 30-second or a 15-second cut down, which
Gotcha.
sometimes I'll use those. But sometimes I'll just cut down from the 2-minute cue. But it's a chance to just have pure, unadulterated, like, fun. Because, a lot of these scenes are like depressing as
Yeah.
Our marriage is going to end, and I guess we're not meant to be together, and I thought you were going to be my wife, but actually I hate you, and we disagree about everything. And it's like, whoa, like, you don't want to, if you're an audience member, I don't want to land in that and stay in that entire. So, like, you're going to go into something hopefully a little bit more lighthearted next, but like a cue that's like, gets us into feeling like,
gotcha.
Breathe. It's okay. That was really heavy, guys. It's okay. We're going to have some fun.
Yeah, this is the wasabi in between the sushi pieces, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or like a cocktail.
Not the wasabi, the ginger. The little ginger slices, they give you.
Yeah, sometimes a little wasabi, sometimes a little spicy, a little bit, but yeah, or a cocktail. It's like having a cocktail and a drink, and it's like, okay, all right,
gotcha.
But it's often different composers give the best or different libraries have the best transition music, and different libraries have more of the in-scene cues. And by the way, just to get back to one other thing, you mentioned tasking. Sometimes we do use tasking music. Not every cue needs to have that build.
Right.
For most of my scene work, I want cues that have at least a little bit of a build, and sometimes a bigger build. But sometimes it just needs to be like giving a little texture, a little playfulness, a little something. And tasking music is what we call for that. And that does not have to be building. Yeah.
And this is something I tell composers all the time is, like, not one form is going to fit for all. Like, trailer cues are different than sports cues, different from tasking cues, different from drones, different from emotional, dramatic cues. Each type of cue kind of needs to be taken, for what it is and what it's looking to accomplish, so.
Yeah. And drones are great too. And often they're not building or doing that much, but some drones are beautiful and really, so that's a good point.
Yeah, excellent. So changing gears really quick as we're coming up towards the end here, and this is something I know that every composer wants to know about editors and libraries, and that is two questions. Question number one is, and you might have hinted at this already, but what do you don't need any more of this type of music, please? Composers, quit giving this to us. And the second question is, what type of music do you absolutely you are like a starving man, I can't eat enough of this?
Okay. For me personally, in the types of shows that I work on, I don't want to hear any, sort of traditional reality music. I mean, the sort of like pizzicato, is that the word?
Yeah, the plucky strings.
Yeah. It's just it exhausts me. It's like
you're over it. You're so over it.
Yeah. Now, if there's a way to sort of incorporate the feeling or even some of the instrumentation, but blend it, like you said, into like a fusion of something else where it still evokes the same type of like comedic dramedy, great. But I don't want more of that. I don't want any sort of cheesy instrumentation or like a synthesizer or like something that feels really cheesy or homemade. That like I definitely don't want that, or something that sounds like, oh, this was like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it well.
No. I think pizzicato dramedy. That's one of those things that you wouldn't be the first editor or publisher who I've heard say we're done with pizzicato dramedy, and yet there and
because there are networks who say, well, every show that you do, every single show, the network says, guys, we want this to sound entirely different from every show that we've ever done before.
Right.
We don't want this to sound like any show and we want to really go dry. We don't want wall to wall. Really, we're really serious about this. Every single
smash cut to the next scene. It's all pizzicato dramedy, and you have 38 minutes of music in a 42-minute episode.
Because inevitably, they're watching like, the first, episode. They're like, guys, this doesn't sound like any show that we're used to. And, and where's the music? Like, it's so weird. It sounds like you need to add more. I know we said no wall to wall. And so it's like, it's finding that balance.
Yeah.
But the other thing is like, I don't want distracting instrumentation. If don't get too creative with like, distracting instrumentation, because 9 times out of 10 I have dialogue underneath.
Yeah.
So if I have stems and I can take it out, great. But if it's in the full mix and it's kind of mixed in it's really prominent and it's distracting from my dialogue, I might just skip to the next cue. I might not even dig into the stems if it's really hard for me to find it without that. What I'm most craving very often is really cool, fun pop music for transitions. That's just like, I need a bunch of them, depending on the show. I need a bunch of them for every single episode, and I can't repeat them. And it's the type of cue that if you get it in on Love Is Blind or whatever, and one of these like network shows, it's like you really hear it. It really it's
it's
identifiable.
usually I know in your royalty statements. They could be considered featured placement. They're not themes, but they're not background because it's not under dialogue. So it might kind of get elevated to that next tier. I've seen things get kind of pushed into featured because there's no dialogue over it. Just for clarification of the transitions, because I'm really interested in that. Are they full length, like 2-minute cues, or are they specific, like 30 seconds of pop, or what?
Very, very often what I'll find is it's a 2-minute cue with vocals. It's very often a lyric up cues. I don't always need the vocals, and it can be overwhelming to have too many of those in a show. But very often it's a lyric up cue, 2 minutes long. And then there's shorter versions. There's a 30-second version and sometimes a 15-second version, but I'll often cut from the longer 2-minute cue. But it depends. I mean, there's also things called bumpers where it's just like, for like an act out, like a 15 or 30-second thing just to like get me out of that scene and into like a next on or a tease.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, I hate cutting teases, but some shows still do it. And tease music, if you can do ramp up to a lot of emotion like in 15 seconds, and you want to, if you've made something for me that's 15 or 30 seconds long that does all that work for me, sometimes I'll just use that, and it's like, okay, great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know what? I'll cut my video to your music.
I might just do that. Yeah,
you made my life easier.
Occasionally, yeah.
Right. And okay, so pop transitions. That's good. You've given me
hip hop, or just sort of current day.
Gotcha.
Current day. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, Josh, I just thank you so much. And this isn't the last we're going to hear from you, because for our listeners and our viewers, Josh has agreed to be our April workshop or do our April workshop. So stay tuned for specific dates and times. We're still ironing out schedules because you're in the middle of doing your job. And so we don't know exactly when the date and time is, but it is going to be in April. And Josh has agreed to do a couple of things. First of all, it's going to be an open AMA, just kind of like what we're doing, Ask Me Anything. And he's going to listen to some of your cues and give you feedback. He's not going to tell you anything about your chord choices. He's not going to tell you anything about the quantization or anything like that. But what he is going to do is he's going to give you very real, very candid feedback from an editor as if an editor was going to use this. And so be on the lookout for that date. That is coming in late April. That is a feature for our friends and family subscribers. And Josh, I'm super excited to have you joining us for that. And thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a very, very busy time for you. And thank you, Natalie, if you're watching. Thank you for connecting us. I feel like, if any friend of Natalie's is an absolute friend of mine, and I just thank you for letting us get a peek into your world.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to talking to some of your students and friends, and I think it'll be fun. So thank you.
Again, a huge thanks to Josh for sitting down and giving me so much of his time. I mean, I probably could have gone a whole other hour. Now, as of today, as of this recording, that workshop with him is going to be April 24th. We're still trying to nail down a time. It's probably going to be in the afternoon. Usually they're between 4 and 5 Eastern, but April 24th, that is the tentative date of that workshop. It's what you got to do when you're working and trying to coordinate with a working editor, in the production process in the middle of putting shows together. So again, Josh, thank you so much. Yeah, go check out his IMDb, man. It's what's up. He's bona fide. So yeah, thanks again, Josh. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we return, we are going to check out an epic trailer cue written by longtime community member and supporter Richard Bagley. But first, a few words from Shannon Croft, Mrs. 52 Qs, telling you all about how you can join the community.
Hey y'all, I'm Shannon Croft, and I want to tell you that the 52 Qs podcast is made possible by viewers and listeners just like you, composers and producers who are looking for a better way to connect and collaborate. You see, 52 Qs isn't just another website selling static, pre-recorded videos to a mass audience. It's a fun, vibrant, and positive community that comes together online for sharing cues, getting feedback, and discussing what's up in the production music industry. You'll find both personalized feedback and live interaction, which are the best and fastest ways to grow your skills and earn more placements. The best part is that the 52 Qs community is absolutely free. And when you're ready to take your career to the next level, we offer friends and family subscriptions, which unlock weekly live streams, live interactive group feedback sessions, monthly interactive workshops, and more. Head over to 52qs.com and sign up today. And while you're there, check out our personalized feedback videos, private lessons, and of course, merch. I can't wait to see you at 52qs.com.
All right, that was an untitled trailer. It's trailer number 9 by Richard Bagley. Richard, I hope you are doing well. Thank you so much for your continued support. Really, really, really means the world to me. I really enjoyed this, man. I was a little worried about the loudness on the front end, but we got there, and I think we could probably push it a little bit more. I know we were up around -14 or so, and I think that's safe. But it's so quiet here at the top that I would probably goose it just a little bit. And also watch some of the low end of your mix. I felt like it got a little rumbly, and there's a lot, if I fast forward it, there's a lot of energy, in the 10 to 20 to 30 hertz range that is just kind of low rumble. And I don't think it's doing you any favors. And so you can hear right around 45, 50 to 60 hertz, a lot of those big drums. I think we probably need to do a little bit better job kind of divvying up the low end EQs and making sure that it's not just this kind of low out of control rumble. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you put a high pass at 20 hertz and below, maybe just to help clean it up just a little bit there. I'm just gonna let's duck down here. Just at around 65 hertz, just ducking that down a little bit. And also, again, looking at your mix, there's a pretty steep cutoff right around in here, and then another little, it's like some noise or something there in your mix. This is where plugins like FabFilter work so well, because their EQ allows you to really like forensically look at some of these things. And so, yeah, right around 18K or so, it looks like there's a pretty aggressive low pass. And then we have that little bit happening there. And so, I also, looking at the form and everything, I felt like the differentiation between Act 1 and Act 2, like Act 3 is great. Fantastic edit point right here. I think this is spot on. But I felt like we just kind of eased our way maybe a little bit too much into Act 2. All right, so here's the beginning of Act 2, around 30 seconds. I think this is really, really nice. And it might be as simple as bringing up your string ostinatos in the mix. It's just so there's some motion. It feels like we just like ease into it a little bit too much, and the edit point itself right in here isn't necessarily clearly defined. If we were to zoom in, it's not nearly as defined as the edit point leading into Act 2. And so from an editor standpoint, we just had a whole episode about like what editors need. That might be a little tough for them to insert dialogue, because they would have to like go in, kind of chop it, move it around, and that might sound. And then bring it back in. So I think how I would probably fix it here is I would probably have this duck down a little bit more to, not to 0, but duck down a little bit steeper slope, and then come out a little bit more aggressively here. I think just to give a more clearly defined edit point, bringing up the string ostinatos so that there's more, their forward motion. Yeah, in general, I think sustained sounds can come down. And did we kind of lose our melody? Trying to... All right. Okay. All right, so we're still taking that melodic motif. Okay, now we passed it on to the strings. Nice. Again, yeah, that the double bass arco can come way down. All right. And I should hear dun dun. So I think we could make that main melody more prominent here. I feel like the melody we've left a little bit behind. See if it comes back. Yes. Now we need bum bum. Like the choir. And we sit on tonic a little bit too long here. Now we might want to add some rhythmic punches. Bum, jump, bum, 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 jump, dun, 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 something like that. So instead of just holding on this one chord for 4 bars, and I think you could also get away with adding a tag, a little coda, just the piano notes, bum 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 bum, just a little tag, a little denouement moment. I think could be really effective there. But I really enjoyed it. Big epic writing. I thought the textures were spot on. Just needs a little bit of mix work and a little bit of melodic work there in the third act to really bring it forward. But I absolutely enjoyed this. Thank you so much for sending this along. As I mentioned, this was sent along during our week 13 feedback threads. We put feedback threads together every single week, and this week we are checking out cues written for week 14, and I will be featuring one of these cues on next week's podcast. Also, you might have noticed that I'm wearing this shirt. I usually wear a 52Q shirt, and this is an Album Accelerator shirt. We have recently unveiled our Album Accelerator, which is a program and a community within 52Qs that is all about helping you write a production music album with over 6.5 hours of video content, as well as a 90-minute one-on-one Zoom session, videos with topics ranging from, do you even need to write an album? How long should your album be? Do you need an album concept? What are different types of concepts? What about using references? Modeling, sustainable creativity. What about the production process, form and structure, mixing and mastering, good titles, finding a library, pitching your album, handling criticism and feedback, talking deliverables, the business side of things, alts, stems, cut downs, metadata, and a ton more. And so if that's something that you're interested in and you're already a member of the 52Qs community, then you can just click on Album Accelerator here on the left-hand side. Or if you're not a part of the community, you can head over to 52qs.com/accelerator. Would love to have you in the program. Like I said, 6.5 hours of videos, 6 different modules with multiple lessons in there. And so, yeah, would love to have you join us over there. Also, if you enjoyed the feedback that I gave Richard on his cue and you would like feedback for your own cue, then head over to 52cues.com/coaching, where you can order up your own feedback video. I would love to check it out and talk all things theory, titles, structure, form, harmony, mixing, all of that. Would love to give you feedback. And while you're over there at 52cues.com/coaching, you can also check out and book a one-on-one Zoom session, or you can sign up for our summer 2023 mastermind, or sign up for the mailing list and know when registration opens for that. But that is going to do it for me this week. You absolutely want to tune in next week, where I will be talking about a non-pianist's overview of some piano libraries, and this topic came up because I was working in Keyscape's brand new felt or double felt grand piano this week for the cue, or I guess it was last week. And I just thought, you know what, I want to talk about it, talk about felt grands. And so we're going to talk Keyscape. We're going to compare and look at some of those pianos. We're going to talk noir. We're going to talk about native instruments, their grandeur, also the piano in blue. And so it's not going to be an exhaustive. I'm not Sanjay C, right? I'm not going to be pulling out all of these libraries. It's the libraries that I have used and my thoughts on those. And you definitely want to tune in for that. Also, I'm going to give another huge shout out to the family, friends, and patrons of 52 Cues who quite literally make all of this possible. Thank you so much. Just know that I love and appreciate you. And even if you're not a friend or family or a patron, just know that I love and appreciate you. And I know that the universe has amazing plans for you. So until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2023 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community and submitting your cue for consideration on the podcast, head over to 52cues.com.